Greetings, trans family. This is Reverend Kyle Applegate again, and thank you for tuning in to my channel. Please hit the subscribe if you haven't done that yet, because that would be super helpful to me. I appreciate it. Today's topic is trans surgeries, and it's a big topic, so kind of bear with me and see how much I can get into this one thing. What I want to do, I'm just sharing my journey. What people choose to do with their own bodies is up to them, and this has really been a lifelong process for me. I've been on hormones for 20 years, so surgeries were things that came up in my journey, so that's something that I want to share with you all. I'm going to start off this talk with reading a poem that I wrote. I have my first poetry book out on Kindle now that's called Sacred Scrawl, and it's Reverend Kyle Applegate. So if you're interested in hearing more of my poems, that would be the place to look. So this poem I actually wrote in 2010, and I thought that it would be a good starter insight into part of my process. So again, this is 13 years ago, right? So the name of it is Parts. Cut me up, please. Take the parts of me that I no longer want to see. I'm tired of looking at these parts that aren't me, parts I can't hide, these girly, feminine, womanly parts. I don't know how they do it, flaunting and flossing, waxing and waning their parts, rubbing them against his shoulder to get a promotion, parts, or a stranger's arm to get a date, parts. Get them out of my face and off of my chest, cut me loose from these parts. I yearn to sail to another shore, far from my mother's parts from which I was created. Tell Eve I did not consent to this, though Lilith I might have been cool to hang out with. Maybe she could explain why I was given these parts, parts I grew to resent as they grew. Only the blood sport of surgeons knew. They brought me my freedom through alchemy gone wild, leaving behind my heart in parts. So the bottom line is that everybody is born with a body, and everybody modifies their looks, their body, to make themselves feel more comfortable. People grow their hair long, they cut it short, they pierce their ears. And also lots and lots of millions of people get plastic surgeries, right, to modify their bodies, to make themselves feel more comfortable. But when it comes to gender, if people modify their body because of gender-related reasons, everybody freaks out, right? But the truth is that everybody modifies their bodies. So what I usually find is that non-trans people, and I use that term non-trans people instead of cis. I don't think that people that aren't born trans need a special title to identify themselves, and I like to use the term non-trans because it makes trans be the norm, which it is in my life. So a lot of times non-trans people will ask, oh, did you have the surgery? Like there's one surgery that magically poof, you wake up and you're another gender, and it's not like that. Surgeries are very personal. There's multiple stages and levels of surgery that people can have. And so I don't even know what that means. Like, did you have the surgery? So being trans and somebody's gender and identity is not about body parts. And that's like the big message that I try to get through to people. A really good example of this, there's an old movie called Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. And in this movie, the big local companies were putting chemicals in the ground and in the water, and everybody in this town was getting sick from it. And So they were all getting cancers and stuff from this, and so Julia Roberts was this lawyer, or helping lawyers to fight this case for the local townspeople. And there was this young mom, and she was sitting in bed recuperating from, she had had a hysterectomy, and she had had breast cancer, right? And so she's sitting in bed, and she says to Julia Roberts, like, if they take away my womb and my breasts, am I still a woman? And Julia Roberts says, of course you are. That's who you are. You know, you're a mom, like you're a woman. And so that's really speaks to that your identity is not about body parts. And if you would think of like your aunt or something, if she had breast cancer and had her breast removed, that doesn't make her a man. She's still your aunt. She's still a woman. That's who she is. So that's the example that I like to give when I talk about body parts and surgeries, and who what makes you who you are. So when I was so it's not okay to ask questions like that, like what body parts that somebody has. You wouldn't ask your aunt or uncle, do you have a penis, do you have a vagina? Like, it's not any of your business. And in order to ask questions like that, you have to at least take me out to a lobster dinner first. So it's a personal question. It's not something that comes up right away to just quell your curiosity, right? So many years ago, again, I've been on hormones for 20 years. And so in the early on in my transition, I started going to support groups at the local gay community center. And it was very obvious right away that there were a whole bunch of 20 somethings, like early people that were early in transition era, thinking about it. And then there was a group of like 5 or 6 of us that were all around 40 years old. And so the older people, we all kind of we all got along and started having coffee together or whatever to talk about, because we we're at a different stage in life. And often I would hear a lot of the younger people say, oh, I want to get this and this and this done, talking about all these surgeries. And what I would say to them is, surgery kicks your butt. Like, try having one surgery. It's really difficult. And everybody thinks that their surgery is going to have the best outcome, and it's going to come out, the results that they want. And surgery doesn't work that way. Bodies don't work that way. Doctors are different from state to state, from country to country, how they do things. And granted, things are much better now than they were 20 years ago. And some of the surgeries, the female to male surgeries, aren't as perfected, and there's a higher rejection rate than there is for male to female people. So it's really kind of hit and miss. And so that's kind of the message that I want to give, that people think that their surgery is going to come out great, and there's side effects. Everybody's body's different in how it heals, and the stressors that are going on in people's lives, and there's lots of factors to how people heal as well. So even if you have the perfect surgery, you could have different outcomes if your immune system's run down, and you're dealing with other life stressors, are all factors. So my first surgery that I had, was having my tubes tied when I was about 30 years old, and like 29, 30. And because I didn't have any children at that time, I really had to see like 2 different therapists and a doctor, and I had to write a letter saying that I understood that this was irreversible. So just to kind of go back a little bit, I was married very young, my first marriage. He was 18, I was 19, and we were together for 10 years. We were married for 8.5. And so when I was 25, I tried to get pregnant. We tried and tried and tried, and for 3 years, and it just wasn't working. And after that marriage dissolved, I was kind of blaming him at the time because he got tested and he had a low sperm count. But I didn't think that there was anything wrong with me. And it wasn't until I went to get my tubes tied that I found out that I had endometriosis. And so I had a lot of scar tissue. And so there was a slim chance of me getting pregnant anyway. But at that time, I really started to like think about gender stuff. Um, and and so I made the decision I do not want to have kids, and I never regretted that decision. I love kids. I love my nieces and nephews, but it just wasn't a choice for me that I wanted. So I got my tubes tied, and again, that's when I found out that I had endometriosis, and also that I I didn't think of this at the time, but looking back, I think that that was like 16 years later, reading the notes of my surgery. I really realized that that was my first trans related surgery, because for me to separate sex and reproduction, that I could have sex and not have to micromanage or be overly obsessed with my fertility, was so freeing. So for the first time, I could have sex in my head. I could have sex like a guy, that I could enjoy it and not have to worry about getting pregnant. So the responsibility of my fertility was really overwhelming for me. So that was really, um, again, in retrospect, I was like, oh, that was my first trans related surgery. So after I was on, so many years later, I went on hormones, and I have a whole video on that, on the effects of hormones and that process. Um, but after being on hormones for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years, I decided to have top surgery. So my chest always bothered me. It was always something that I felt self conscious about, and like tried to hide. And so for me, chest surgery was important, getting top surgery. And so that's something that I mean, I didn't have a large chest to begin with, but it's something that they usually do in 2 stages, right? They'll do one surgery and take out the initial material, breast tissue, and then they let it heal for at least 9 months, usually a year, year and a half, before you can get the revision surgery, because they need a good blood supply to the nipple to like so it can heal. Um, and so I definitely, to this day, I still have a lot of scar tissue. Um, I used to love to have my nipples played with, and now it's painful. I don't want anybody, I can rub it flat, like with a flat hand, but not to pinch the nipples at all. It's painful. It's like, ooh, I get like a sharp pain. And so, so again, I have no regrets of having surgery. It's just not perfected. And so a year later, I went and had a revision done where they, and both times I had drains in, and I had fluid retention. So twice I had to go in and get that drained. While I still had drains in, it still was filling up with fluid. Um, so, and then the other part of it was one of the surgeries, the IV that he put in my arm. I had the chemicals that they used, the anesthesia burned my artery, so I felt like I had a hard, like, it felt like a ballpoint pen, like a plastic pen underneath my arm for the artery. It felt hot, and he scarred the artery, right? So it was kind of traumatized. So I had to like do massages on my arm, and it took a good 6 months, 5 months for that to like start to loosen up and soften up. I had to use warm packs on my arm, stuff like that. So it was a lot of aftercare. And I remember at the time I had a loft bed, so I bought my first real piece of furniture. I bought a couch because I knew I couldn't climb up and down out of my bed when I had like binding on and drains and stuff like that. So it was kind of messy. Um, so that was my first surgery, and well, my second surgery, top surgery, and they did it in 2 stages. So the next surgery that I had was, I would say about, I want to say eight 8 years on hormones, And at that point, I decided to get a hysterectomy. And so when you're on hormones, and this is in my hormones video, um, the estrogen testosterone balance is the the testosterone, taking testosterone shots kind of negates the estrogen. So you still, I mean, and it just kind of makes your um, reproductive organs kind of wither. They're just kind of hanging out there. They're not getting estrogen. And so they say that you can go for a while and not need a hysterectomy, but eventually, if you start having like breakthrough bleeding or cramping or things like that, it's probably a good idea to get a hysterectomy. If you have, I mean, if you're not having any problems, fine, just let things lie. But for me, um, I think with my past history of having endometriosis and stuff like that, it just, for me, it was time. And I was able to get it covered by health insurance. Um, and also, I think because of my age at that time. So there's different surgeries for hysterectomy, and I chose to get a nerve sparing hysterectomy, which means that I chose to keep the cervix and get rid of everything above that, which is the uterus and the ovaries and fallopian tubes. So for me, it made sense structurally to keep the cervix because there's a lot of supportive ligaments that kind of hold everything in place. And because on testosterone, you get like eventually um, like vaginal atrophy or problems like that. So for me, structurally, it just made sense, and also topographically, like if you think of a topographical map, that it still would feel the same that I have a cervix and stuff. To me, those things are important. I wish more women would talk about hysterectomies with each other because some people aren't a candidate for nerve sparing hysterectomies. Because they've been exposed to HPV, and there might be more of a chance of getting cervical cancer. And so if you choose to keep the cervix, or if you're a candidate to have that kind of surgery, it's still important to get pap smears and get cervical screenings done. But for me, that worked out fine. Then there's a healing process that happens over time. And after I healed up, like, sex was completely fine, and I haven't had any problems. So for me, that worked out really well. I think when you are getting a hysterectomy, don't let the doctors rush you out of the hospital. Take your time. Um, for me, they kept me for 3 days, and I was really thankful about that. I did have a catheter for like a day, day and a half, something like that. But I also tend to have low blood pressure, and so surgeries really, again, kick your butt. And a hysterectomy is a pretty major surgery. You can't lift anything. You have to just kind of take it easy for a couple of weeks after that. But once you heal up, everything was fine. Another benefit of being trans, like if there are benefits, you got to count them, is that you also get your own room. So I got my own room in the OB/GYN ward, right, is where they do hysterectomies. And so I was able to get my own room, and again, they kept me for 3 days. So so that was all that was like, I felt that I was treated really respectfully, and I'm sure it was out of their comfort um, to make special accommodations, but to have a person like me with a beard in the OB/GYN ward was like weird, whatever. But one of the things I remember, just before I went to sleep, on the table, they had my arm out, strapped down so they can put the IV in. And I heard them say, "Oh, move her arm over here." And then I was out. But that's like the last thing that I remember. Um, so that's, so that was like one weird experience. But like I said, for the most part, I felt that I was treated really respectfully. When I did get I think I'm going back to my other surgery when I had my tubes tied. uh, what I remember was that I was on the table for quite a while, that both of my sisters had had their tubes tied after they had children. And they said, oh, it's no big deal. It's a little quarter-inch, eighth-inch scar. But when they went to do my surgery, no, I had all this scar tissue. And so they had to open me up. I had like a 4-inch scar across my lower abdomen. Like, you don't even see it. It really healed now. Um, but they kept like going in and snipping a little and then bringing it to the lab and saying, nope, that's not fallopian tube, that's scar tissue, and then it's cut a little more and then bring it to the lab, and like they kept doing that. And so it was like an hour long, hour and a half long surgery or something, when it should have been much shorter than that. And so um, the reason for that was, again, like I had endometriosis, but also the ovary wasn't, I mean, one was kind of small, whatever, but the other one was what they call a streaked ovary. It's a remnant of an ovary. Like it never really developed all the way. So it was just like a little bit of tissue, so they couldn't tell like what was scar tissue, what was tube. And so years later I learned that that's one of the symptoms of being intersexed, when the fallopian tube, the ovary, doesn't really form all the way, right? So it's just a little remnant of something. And so I thought that was really interesting as well. So those are just some of the things that I've come upon in my surgeries. I don't have any regrets. I'm really was really glad with the outcomes of my surgeries. I still have like a divot in my chest that I'm kind of self conscious about, because I wore the binder too long after my surgery. I mean, when I say too long, I want to say 5 days instead of like 2 days or a day and a half, whatever, because the doctor wasn't really that clear on instructions. When I mean, also you're doped up and you're nauseous. And the other thing is, when I have surgeries, because I've had several, I've had wrist surgery, I've had different things done over the years. Anesthesia totally turns me into a puke machine. So if you know that about yourself, they can give you something like anti-nausea medicine before you have surgery, which can be super helpful. So beforehand. So the last thing I just kind of want to talk about with in regards to surgery is about healing. And like I said before, I mean, doctors are different and bodies are different in the way they heal. But to give yourself the best possible outcomes, like really, you shouldn't be smoking. You shouldn't smoke anyway, but it makes the healing process a lot longer. Also, watching your weight and your diet. Some people, like, they don't even want to give you anesthesia if you're have like asthma, or excess of weight can also cause problems during surgery or for the healing process. It's important to get rest and to have a good support system if you're having any kind of major surgeries like these, because it again, it just really helps to have people, bring your food, have things set up. When you go, like especially top surgery, you can't put your arms over your head and put sweatshirts on. You need things with zippers or buttons to be able to like get dressed and undressed more easier for yourself. And I really want to just take a moment to acknowledge that all these things kind of sound like coming from a place of privilege. I know if people are homeless, not even able to get medications or have health care, and having proper nutrition, all these things can really be setbacks for having surgeries. And the only reason why I was able to afford having chest surgery, because my insurance does not cover it. Now the laws are different and they're changing, but at the time, I had a lawsuit going with Workman's Comp, that because I got asthma when I was a machinist. And so that's the only reason why I was able to afford top surgery. So I really acknowledge that surgery is unattainable for many people and places in the world. So I mean, I'm hopeful that things are changing and that people are able to afford more surgeries and or things that procedures that help them feel more comfortable in their bodies. So that's about it. I mean, those are my surgery journeys, and again, it's your body parts not matching can be really uncomfortable. Um, but you have to pick your battles and just try to remain hopeful that that someday you may be in a better position to be able to afford these things, or just to try to be patient and just make peace with yourself one day at a time to get through these things. So my blessings to you, and I really appreciate you tuning in. So I'm with you. Peace be with you.